you want, whatever you need, anything you want done, baby, do it naturally. 'Cause I'm never, it's all in me. It's all in
I saw you out here. All right, appreciate it. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Welcome back to episode 8. We've done 8 episodes this series. Wow.
Man, it don't even feel like it though.
I know. Making sense of diversity as we continue to cover women empowerment. And today's session, we will talk about overcoming gender-based harassment with our 2 wonderful guests. As you know, or may not know, for those who are new, my name is Larry Jefferson, and I have the great privilege of sharing this stage each week with my partner.
Yes, sir. Dantrell Smith from the great city of Memphis. Hey, Memphis is in the NIT, playing in Dallas, Texas.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so if they make it to the final. You said what?
How are the Grizzlies doing?
Man, they beat the Celtics last night, man. Don't bring that back up, man. It was a painful game. We lost in overtime, man. So I know that's why you asked that question.
Nevertheless, excited about our 2 guests, and we'll let them introduce themselves.
Yeah.
So whomever wants to go first.
Going first. Me?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll go first. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you enjoyed your spring break last week. My name is Candace Whalen. I'm an associate director for human resources for a pharmaceutical company. Been in human resources for about 12 years now, in different facets of HR. So from talent acquisition to career development, and also as a business human resources partner, which that's what I'm currently doing now. I'm located in Austin, Texas. I do support a site of about 450 employees. And it's interesting things that's happening every day as far as what's going on in site and related to, things we're seeing in the external environment. So happy to join everyone today and looking forward to having a great conversation.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Yumna Sayed Swift. I'm a licensed master social worker. I work as a psychotherapist here in Austin, Texas, and also in Austin. I work at a practice called Rebel in Bloom. We're a feminist trauma therapy organization, and I work with people of all backgrounds. But, my heart is really in working with other fellow women of color, people of color, and just, creating spaces that are needed. So I'm excited to be a part of this. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for
Candace, I heard you know my boy Jamal Sanders.
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
is he in Dallas now?
Yeah, he saw the flyer that I posted, and he was
great.
like, he messaged me and was like, you bringing Candace on? I was like, that's my cousin. I was like, yeah, man, you got to come on to the shows. I don't know if he's in on here yet, but he said he's going to try to log in, so we'll see.
Awesome. Small world. Yes.
Well, let's start. You want us to take it, Dantrell?
Yeah, I got it. So as you all know, we're talking about gender-based harassment. It's kind of one of these topics that I feel Larry and I have discussed. It doesn't really get much attention. I mean, it happens, right? And it's real. It's very serious. But to have an open forum where we can discuss and learn and share, it doesn't really happen much. So just to kind of lay the groundwork, let's talk about, when you hear the term gender-based harassment, like what immediately comes to mind? Like how do you define that?
That's a very good question. So, being in HR, just think of like the traditional definition of harassment, which is basically, bullying or aggressive or intimidation type behavior towards someone based on certain characteristics. So, for example, if we're speaking of gender, that'll be related to, of course, if you're male or female, or possibly, what's related, sexual orientation wise that, may determine, who you are. So I would say like that's like the textbook definition of what gender-based harassment is.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Candace said. I also think for me, having the background I have in the work that I do, for me, when I think of gender-based harassment, I also think of violence, right? From a professional standpoint, my background has been largely in working with survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault. And so, I mean, gender-based violence is something that affects all communities, all backgrounds. But really what comes up for me is also just the idea of violence and how violence isn't necessarily just physical violence, but there's emotional and mental trauma that we can get to from gender-based harassment.
And I know this is not in our list of questions, but how does that impact the work of individuals when they are constantly dealing with some form of harassment in the workplace?
So it definitely impacts, of course, you're in a business, you're looking for, efficiency and productivity, impacts that. It impacts their focus. It's difficult for them to, come into work and be productive. Of course, number one thing for our people, our employees, at my organization is make sure, their health and safety is a priority. And we definitely have reiterate that message over the past year since, COVID has come into place, but also other outlying factors related to, things that we're talking about now. And just to give you some more background, regarding what I'm seeing in the workplace, there's definitely been an uptick in, I would say, harassment related situations or domestic violence outside of work. And that's because more people are working at home, they're together, the kids are at home, the stress levels are high. So there is an uptick in that space. And unfortunately, sometimes people coming into the office or being logged on to work at home is their safe place because that's protecting them from situations that may be happening at home.
Wow.
I'm sorry, you'll have to excuse me. My toddler just barged in here.
That's all right.
I figured too.
It happens.
I just was looking over. Speaking of working from home.
Right.
And I figure in your line of work, you probably definitely have some more. Oh, did she walk away?
I think she went in. He probably wanted a sandwich or something. Mommy,
yes, but she probably has more examples of what she's experienced in her line of work as far as what people are experiencing. But it's documented in the data that the uptick of these type of situations are happening more and more outside of work.
And it's funny because the next question asks, what kind of data research is being done to identify and help change the narrative behind all of it?
One of the questions I did want to ask though is like, specifically since we're talking about women, I mean, like how often does that happen? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it happens probably like every day, but like
I was gonna ask, you mean on the books or off, or like just daily lived experience? Because I think
both. This is a real show, so we want you to be real.
I mean, then you're right. Yeah, I would say it's every day, and I feel like, it's big things, it's small things. It might be, I'm sure Candace can speak to this more specifically about the workplace, but it can be anything from, unwanted attention to smaller microaggressions, right? Like even something like the very outdated concept of calling a woman sweetheart at work, right? Like that used to be a thing that no one thought twice about.
Wow.
And now when you think about it, it might make someone feel uncomfortable.
That's a good point. Candace, did you want to add? Oh, go ahead.
The thing is too, when let's say if we're looking at data, a lot of the data is combined as far as what people experience at work and outside of work. So I was looking up some statistics yesterday, and 82% of women have experienced some type of harassment, either inside of work or outside of work. But only 71% of women actually do report that harassment. So, excuse me, actually do not report the harassment.
Oh, wow.
71 do
So it's only about 9% that actually, and this is of course, people who are, feel they're being harassed. We're actually doing something about it. So that's pretty significant as far as numbers, as far as majority of women are in these situations, but the majority of them are not doing anything about it. And I think we'll go into the reasoning later. I know that's a variety of reasons, just from, speaking to people who have been in situations in the workplace, or just talking to friends and family about how they feel about it.
Dang, 71%, like
71%, yes. And if we want to go into the reason, I would say the top reasonings are, for one, they're concerned about retaliation, as far as from losing opportunities within the workplace to, possibly losing their job. I would say the second reason is lack of accountability, as far as they feel like nothing is going to be done if they report this, or there may be situations if they know for sure that other people have been harassed, it's been reported and nothing has been done. So why should they, express their concerns or, voice their story if they know nothing is going to be done? So I would say those are the top reasons harassment hasn't been reported. And I think we've seen several examples in our environments outside of work of how, situations are treated differently based on who those individuals are. And we're seeing that on a daily basis, and we can do a comparison politically from, from our former president to the governor of New York, what their experience and what they're going through, and the differences of how these situations are being treated.
Yeah, and just to follow that up, I mean, I think the piece about retaliation is so real, and then also that idea of, well, the whole idea of like kind of boys will be boys, right? And if you think about more specifically certain industries that have been male dominated, I'm thinking about, just on a personal note, I have a friend who used to work at a law firm that she was the only woman on the team. She was also much younger than everybody else. And she would call me, crying from her office and just say, like, the stuff that they're saying or doing is so subtle. Like, I can't even necessarily take it to HR because they're just going to laugh in my face.
Wow.
And just to know, like, day to day, she's feeling that experience of harassment, and to know, like, well, there's no point in speaking up because they're just going to say, like, this is just how it is on our team. And, you need to have thicker skin. Because then there's that narrative that gets spun against women. If we're talking specific about women in the workplace, then that narrative of, like, either she's too sensitive, right? Or if she speaks up, then there's the narrative of, well, she's, she has a bad sense of humor, or she's, she's the argumentative woman and you can't really deal with her. Like, she's difficult. And then when you add race into that, then you've got the angry Black woman stereotype, or the angry brown woman stereotype that happens, right? So there's so many layers to it.
Have you all seen, like, kind of I know you spoke about a little bit, a spike in harassment because of COVID? Like, people being at home, or people still having to go to work, but they are so frustrated with the way that everything's going on in the world that they're trying to take it out on each other. Like, has that increased in any way?
I haven't seen that in the workplace. I've seen more of an uptick in domestic violence at home. I think oftentimes, there may be misunderstandings between peers or managers and employees and things of that nature, and they may be able to work them out themselves, and it's not reported into HR. But I've had several managers reach out to me to, inform me about employees in their home environment, and we just had conversations how we can best support them through that. But that's what I've seen.
I mean, I'm just on a like personal note, glad to hear that that's an option for the folks at your company, because having been someone who worked in that field, I know that oftentimes I had clients that come to me and be like, I don't know who to go to, and that's why they end up at the agencies that I used to work at. And then I would say, well, what about your workplace? And oftentimes, and I'm sure you have experiences, Candace, in supporting the folks that you do, that the harassment that someone experiences when domestic violence is happening at home, it doesn't stay at home, right? They'll be stopped. Their partner will insist on driving them to and from work, insist on knowing who they're talking to at work, who are the, you know, if it's a woman that's being abused, then who's the male you're talking to, and those types of things, or, you know, calling them incessantly while they're at work, those types of things. Those are, I'm just thinking of clients that I've worked with in the past, those are stories that would come up, and then it's like, well, now their workplace is being affected and their performance at work is being affected. And so then they feel like, well, I'm going to get in trouble if I tell anyone why it's happening.
Right.
And those are some very good points. I think now, like over the past year with everything that's happened, you know, from COVID to acknowledging social injustice and just other things, people are, you know, becoming more open or understanding, you know, we just can't leave everything at home. Things are happening, you know, what we have going on is going to impact our work environment as well. So we're having more discussions or open discussions that we've never had in the workplace in the past.
That's great.
Me being an HR leader, I try to make sure everyone understands what their resources are. From, you know, we have counseling services, you know, we have services, you know, if you need support for your kids, support for yourself, just a variety of services. I try to, you know, use various points of communication to understand, for them to understand, you know, that you have other options. You don't have to, you know, find out or figure out things on your own, but also let employees know, I'm here for you. We do have an appropriate chain of command, but, you know, if you don't feel comfortable talking to your manager, or if there's something personal going on, you know, I have this open door policy, reach out to me. Even if my schedule's full, I will make time. So we need to make sure, you know, in the workplace, that open communication and the understanding of what resources are available is communicated to employees. But I think we're getting to a turning point where people, you know, we're looking at each other as people, not just coworkers. And, you know, we're having these discussions, and even my managers are reaching out to me. Candace, my employee wanted to talk to me about this. Can you give me some advice on how to, you know, facilitate that type of conversation? So I'm glad, even though there's some unfortunate things that have happened over the past year, is definitely, you know, changing all of us for the better. And we're talking about things we've never talked about before in the workplace. So it's a good thing.
I guess one of my concerns is a lot of times, you know, and I've not had to have that conversation with anyone, but you know, how does a company or organization have that stand that we're not going to tolerate this, we're not going to allow this to be a continuous type of behavior with not just the little people in the organization, the big people too, who feel like they're invincible to be touched. You know, how does that conversation begin?
Good question. So just, you know, for everyone's awareness, there's federal laws that protect employees. So companies should either be proactive regarding having certain policies and procedures in place for those federal laws, and make sure they're fostering an environment and investigating if something does come up. And when I speak of, you know, federal laws, it's, you know, covers things such as sexual orientation, gender, race, age, disability, things of those are all protected classes that employees fall in. So first and foremost, employees do have recourse outside of work if they're not getting the protection they need within the workplace. But to be a great place to work, one, you need to communicate what your stance are on things. People need to know that from day one, whether it's on your website, the onboarding process, new hire orientation, policies and procedures. Employees should understand, and understand as well where to find that information. So for harassment, let's say, usually companies have a zero tolerance policy for harassment and retaliation, and that should be communicated. So employees should feel comfortable, you know, expressing their concerns if they have them, and companies should do something about it if there are some concerns. Now, I do hear from time to time employees don't understand what their resources are. Again, we need to communicate everything so they can understand what that is. But zero tolerance policy, training opportunities. Usually we offer training to leaders and to employees as well, maybe once a year, on what harassment looks like and what to do if you are experiencing harassment. So that's, you know, some things that should be put in place. Also, I think, you know, it's great that people are having an opportunity to be educated outside of work. You know, Me Too has brought, you know, some education to a lot of people. And there's also a Me Too website that people can check out, you know, if there's something they're passionate about driving outside of work. But basically, employers have a duty to make sure they're protecting their employees and they understand what their resources are once again. I know it's tough too. I just saw someone put up, it is difficult to approve harassment. Excuse me, to prove harassment. I'm reading the question.
Tamisha, you can come on.
I have two goals when I'm working with people. I want to make sure that people are comfortable at work, but also, you know, I need to make sure, you know, we're not putting the business at risk. And you're putting the business at risk if you're not managing these situations versus managing the situations. So sometimes people feel like legal or HR are all about protecting the business and not the employees. I wouldn't say that's necessarily the case. That's not all situations, of course. But we understand if we don't manage situations in-house, it's a liability from a legal perspective for that business.
Can you talk specifically about what are some specific examples of harassment that, you know, women face in the workplace? I mean, I know some people have kind of
shared this from both perspectives because this would be interesting.
Yeah, I want to hear this.
So for men, for y'all awareness, about 43% of men have experienced some type of harassment inside and outside the workplace as well. The most common reasons or common types of harassments is, you know, verbal communication. Number 2 is unwelcome touching. Number 3 is, you know, related to cyberbullying, and we can talk more about that because I want to get the point across as far as, you know, how people are utilizing their social media. You know, social media, I will say, is probably become heavily integrated over the past 10 years, but now we've had to put certain policies in place for people to understand, even though your social media is personal and doesn't necessarily tie to the workplace, what you do on it can impact your job. So we have had employees that have been harassed via social media. And even though my job in HR is not to go look into people's social media accounts to understand what's happening, if it is brought to my attention and it's not following the values of the company, we have to do something about it. And I would say I've seen less on the harassment side. I see more on the discrimination side, where people are supporting certain causes or maybe don't support certain type of people or religion. And concerns come to me where are these people objective in their leadership role if they're posting things like this or liking certain things on social media. So I recommend to everyone, be cognizant of how you utilize that. Either have it private or watch what you post.
Yeah, and just to kind of speak to the question that you were asking about, just like what are some more specific examples? I think, again, like I said earlier, it can be such large things like Candace said, you know, things like unwanted touch or cyberbullying or things like that, or it can be much smaller things like how we address people or just how we, you know, how we interact with people. And there's different levels of discrimination, right? If you're talking about, I'm thinking about even just my own personal experiences. I look really young. I know that. And so when I remember working at one of my previous jobs, I used to get just sort of inherently talked down to, right? Because I was by default one of the youngest people on the team. And then I looked really young. So I got a lot of like, oh, are you sure you know what you're doing? Because I was just like a young woman, right? And then to add to that, a woman of color. And then I mean, I remember in contrast, like I would get told, hey, you need to be like nicer in your emails.
Wow.
So I didn't use enough exclamation points and things like that. Like that was a thing. And that's not necessarily harassment, but it's that idea of like women are treated differently than men are in a lot of cases, right? Of like our expectations. Like I can't be professional and to the point in an email because then I'm judged as harsh. And so again, when you talk about the difference of like, if we do speak up, well, you need to be nicer. right? And it becomes the other person's problem rather than like the structure that we're working against.
So my follow-up question then is, are microaggressions and discrimination, are they encompassed when we talk about harassment? Because I think for a historical perspective, we talk about harassment, it's always been kind of very emotional, physical. So like, oh, you have nice hair, can I just touch your hair? Or, you know, that dress fits really nice. I mean, stuff like that I think from historically has been what we say harassment is. So has harassment changed now to where microaggressions and discrimination is what we clarify as harassment? Am I making sense?
Yes, it just depends on the situation, but there's definitely overlap
Okay.
between both.
I think it
Usually, harassment and discrimination is you're being treated differently, you know, based on certain characteristics. And, you know, usually that differential treatment could involve harassment. And sometimes it's unintentional, but sometimes it could be categorized as harassment.
So, and it's funny that you bring that up because Dantrell and I have had this conversation before. and how do you encourage the person, you know, who's been struggling with this and mentally feel like they're beat down, you know, but it's coming from their direct superior? You know, how does that person, even if the superior feels like, you know what, I didn't know I was doing that, and you address it, it was like, well, this is how I feel, and then it continues. What do you say to that person?
So when I have these conversations, of course, I always thank them for, you know, having the courage to come, you know, have this conversation and talk to me about it and, you know, try to, you know, gain a better understanding of what's going on. Oftentimes people, they want to report something, but they want it to be fixed, but they may not want, let's say their supervisor to know it directly comes from them. Depends on the situation. If I can, you know, fix that problem without, with keeping that person's, you know, confidentiality, I will do that. I will always prioritize what they want first. If it's something directed towards them, you know, I'll make sure they understand what their options are and like, hey, I know this is tough, but, you know, one, I'm here. I have your back. I'm here to make sure that you have a safe place to come work. Two, you know, you may not be the only person that's experiencing this. So the sooner we can get this resolved, the quicker you can get out of this situation and, you know, possibly help others that may be in this situation as well. I think usually once they understand that, you know, the company supports what they're reporting, you know, things do get better and they're willing to, you know, have a discussion or, you know, either follow the best way to get the problem resolved. But, you know, the important things, I have to help build that trust first. And unfortunately, oftentimes that trust isn't there. And it may be because of experience they have at other workplaces or just what they're seeing outside of work that, you know, hasn't worked out for others.
Yeah, I was going to say, before Kim started speaking, I would say my advice would be utilize people like me and Candace, right? Go to HR. I would say that whenever I have clients that are describing difficulties in the workplace, I'm like, hey, HR is there for a reason, right? You need to utilize them. That's why they exist. And then I would say, yeah, therapy is also a very helpful space to have to process those feelings, like you were saying, of feeling beat down or feeling like, you know, afraid to push for a change. I think the other thing that Candace spoke to is that sometimes there's that distrust based on other work experiences, past work experiences. And further, I was thinking about how it's wonderful that there's, you know, in places as large as the place that you work, Candace, you have an HR department that's able to take things on like that. When you think about smaller workplaces, I think that's where a lot of challenges happen too, that maybe if you're working at a mom and pop and you're being harassed, you have no options, right? There is no HR. And so that's where I would say, again, spaces like therapy can be really helpful because you have that space, that safe space to come to talk about what's going on and to brainstorm, how do I deal with this? What are my options? What can I do? And I think that's another thing that people need to be aware of. Is like, if you don't have the relationship or the availability of something like HR, if you're working at a smaller place, that's where things like therapy can also be useful.
But what level of frustration are they at by the time they reach to the therapy session? Is it an early stage, or are they just really like, I'm about to blow?
I'd say I see it all, right? And I think I've got clients that are coming to me to work through trauma from workplace experiences from decades ago. That like, hey, here's what I went through, and it still comes up for me, and I'm realizing I need to talk about it, even though that they're no longer in that specific work experience. They're still impacted by it. And I think that's the other thing that people don't recognize, is that harassment, even if it's just one incident, can really deeply impact somebody. That's the stuff that you carry with you for a long time.
And I would like to say too, what I see, I think it's generational. I feel like more seasoned generations, they're coming to HR, maybe, utilizing therapy when they're getting close to their wits end, maybe. Where, the site I support has a large millennial population, and they may be more open to coming to HR first, sometime before, talking to their manager, if it's a situation that their manager may need to be involved in. So I will say it's generational, but, just regarding your points about counseling or therapy, I think there's an opportunity for everyone to utilize it, even if you think things are going well.
Yeah.
You'll be surprised how much it can help you. And, if you work for, a good sized organization, understand what your opportunities are, what resources they have. There's programs, called EAP, or Resources for Living, where you actually have free sessions for support. So I always encourage anyone, even if you're doing great, to take advantage of therapy or counseling services.
Man,
One of the things,
crazy.
yeah.
Especially everything that's been happening recently. We all need some help.
Yeah, no, I was, that was going to be one of my follow-up questions was can you shed light on kind of what we're really seeing on TV, right? But I want to go to the chat to give the opportunity for our listeners to join in. I think there was a question from somebody, and then we'll come back to the questions that I have. It says, I'm a male and a blind female coworker told me I looked good. Is that sexual harassment?
What? Say that again.
It says, I am a male and a blind female coworker told me I look good. Is that sexual harassment?
Okay, she's blind, but she told him that he looks good.
Yeah, I guess, is that the right question, Larry? Am I reading that right?
And I ignored that question because of who it came from.
Oh, okay. You know the guy.
Like,
okay, my bad. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but one did stick out, and it wasn't a question; it was more so a statement. And I just want to see what you all think about it. It said harassment will reduce as more women join the workforce and climb up the ladder of position. I don't know if I agree with that.
Well, this is how I feel, even though I don't feel like it's measurable yet. I think it's probably already reducing because everything is so public now and quick to spread.
Yeah.
Before you were, innocent till proven guilty. Now you're guilty. And if you're innocent, we'll figure that out later, because companies are trying to jump ahead of, the storm that could happen if they don't address something quickly. So I think it's probably already slowing down. And just, even my interactions with coworkers where, maybe sometimes we joke in the past, but I wouldn't consider it inappropriate. I feel like people are being more careful what they're saying at work now because they're concerned about how it can be perceived. So I think it's already happening. But as far as there's definitely area opportunity for more women to be in the workforce and to progress higher within the organization. Employees now are being intentional about increasing their diversity, and that goes with race and gender. So I think it's a good opportunity for all people of color to hopefully be able to be considered for these positions or take advantage of these opportunities. But with social injustice happening or being brought to light over the past year, there's several companies that are being intentional, like not only for, race, diversity of thought, that we need to have different types of people in these higher level positions. So we're doing the right thing as an organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think historically, there's been data to back this up, but that women haven't been able to progress in the workplace at the same level that men have, especially when you consider if that woman chooses to become a mother, right? Then there is a price that is paid to a person's career if they choose to become a parent. And men, and this has been studied, there has been data on this, men are actually given promotions when they become fathers and like more likely to be on a higher, like an upward track. And women, their careers often stagnate. And there has been lots of research about this. This is not new information that I'm putting out there, but I think that, Candace is right, that we are seeing a shift on a cultural and societal perspective that I think is ideally going to be to our benefit. But in the age of COVID, especially, I don't know if you've seen this, but they've been saying that there's been millions of women that have actually left the workplace because of the challenges of parenting and doing school from home. A lot of that work has fallen to women, and there's been a huge drop in women in the workforce in the last year, even. So I think that we're in an interesting time, especially as we're hopefully coming on the other side of this pandemic with the vaccine rollouts and all of that, maybe we will see a return to the workforce. I think it's a big unknown, though. I think it's great that there's this push and it's so needed. I'm just really hopeful that it draws in the right people, that, these people that have the workforce.
So one of the questions that I had, because one of the things we want our individuals that are listening in to really walk away with some tangible things, as always. And so can you all speak directly to how can I, as a person working in the environment that I'm working in, when I feel that I've experienced it, what options are there for me? And you talked about the 71% go without reporting. How do we decrease that number? You know what I mean?
Well, I'm sure Candace can speak this more than I can, but I would say, take notes. Go ahead. Take notes, write down dates and times when things happen. You have a paper trail.
Keep up with your documentation. That's important. Timing of reporting is important. And unfortunately, I think people lose credibility that we're seeing, outside of work because of the timing of when they report something. So if something's happening, the sooner you report it, the better. And I'm not saying that it should be that way, but unfortunately, it is that way. So report as soon as you can. And if you're around, oftentimes, people may be harassed, and there's people that witness it. You need to speak up. You need to speak up. You need to help that person, or maybe you need to be the person that reports it. And sometimes people, let's say there's, someone that's joking at work, they're saying inappropriate jokes, people are laughing. Just because people are laughing doesn't mean that doesn't make someone feel uncomfortable. Sometimes laughing is a defense mechanism. So if something's inappropriate, you have a relationship with that person, and you can talk to that person, be like, hey, that's probably best that you don't say things like that at work, or, how it can be perceived. And if you're not comfortable, do that, you should escalate it. But I think, again, I know smaller companies may not have HR people or things, but if you have an HR department, it's their responsibility to, investigate these issues and make sure they're taken care of. So people just, need to understand what their options are, within their workplace.
You bring up a good point when you talked about reporting and documentation. Like, how much documentation do I have to take? Because it seems like, depending on the person, me and Larry talk about this all the time. It's like, I'll be like, damn, how much more documentation I need before you're going to take this person out? And
when it gets to the ball gets to my court, I'm doing an actual investigation. So I may ask for dates, times, things of that nature. That's why we're asking for documentation. Sometimes it's just I can't think of the exact word of, when it's just very transparent or, maybe a text message that's inappropriate or email. Sometimes it may be one big thing and that's enough. I'm not saying that this should be your full-time job, but any information to help with, unfortunately, it's a case at this point, will be helpful to make sure something is done. Sometimes it is a he said, she said. But if you have documentation of this is where it happened, these people were there, it's a possibility we can talk to those individuals and, hear their side of the story as well, which would, of course, would help with that person's case.
Like about to start documenting some people.
I know one of the questions too was about changing the narrative and how we can do that. I think we need to be consistent on holding people accountable and, using the same yardstick when we were measuring, whether people were involved in something or not. And I've been talking to a few people about this over the past few days. And I'll use an example of Deshaun Watson, for instance. And Larry, I know you're a Texans fan.
I am.
But there's mixed feedback on what's happening with him, where people are like, they feel like the Houston Texas team is setting him up versus people feel that, there's actual harassment taking place. I think now he's had 12, 13 women, move forward with allegation towards him for sexual misconduct. We can't pick and choose, whose stories we want to listen to, or, what should we acknowledge based on who this person is, if we like them or not, if they play for our favorite team, if they're our favorite actor, if they're our favorite politician. We got to hold everyone accountable the same way. We got to be willing to listen to everyone's story so we can get alignment there on how we manage these situations. But as you can see, we're so divided on everything. We pick and choose what we want to believe based on our narrative. In my role at work, I have to be objective no matter what I think or what I feel like it could, things could have went better if someone didn't do this or do that. But I see in our external environments that people are willing to listen or acknowledge things based on what fits their narrative. And if it doesn't fit their narrative, they'll make excuses for that person. And it's not working well for us. People need to be held accountable the same, and they go through the same investigation process to understand what happened there.
Yeah, to speak to that, I'm thinking about even just, not to get too controversial here, but like talking about Kobe Bryant, he passed last year and there was all this, everyone was mourning him. And then for a lot of survivors, it was very traumatizing and triggering to see this man who was, accused of and went to trial for rape to then just be remembered as this one, and not to take away that he wasn't an incredible athlete, but again, like it's complicated. It's never just one side. Just because he's a great athlete doesn't mean he did do something terrible. Similar to what, what's happening now, right? And like what Candace was saying, until we can hold all people accountable at the same level, I think there is going to be this challenge of the he said, she said, they said, and especially because so often the burden of proof is on the person that's been hurt.
Yes.
We don't believe survivors, and that's shifting, right? Especially with this Me Too movement and all of that. But it's been a long time coming.
So let me ask you all this question: do you all feel as if it's like, for example, if we say it's a woman who has experienced harassment from a male, that if it's just this one incident or one person, that it usually kind of gets pushed under the rug, versus if it's multiple women, then it's kind of the case like, okay, we really got to investigate this guy.
Yeah, and sometimes that happens. It's one or two, and sometimes they look into the credibility of those women versus what this man is possibly, doesn't have to be a man, or what this other person
capable
has done. And it's unfortunate. And Judith, great comment here about, what we're seeing and how infuriating can be. But sometimes people are more concerned about, let's make these people that are filing claims lose their credibility versus, acknowledging what the person they put up on this pedestal has possibly done. And what people are seeing is like, well, I'm seeing this happen around me all the time outside of work, and they're not held accountable. Why should I say something?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I need a job and I need money, so why should I risk my livelihood knowing that there's a strong possibility this person's not going to be held accountable?
Yeah, I think that really speaks to, there's this concept in psychology of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? If your basic needs are at risk, you can't function at a higher level. So if you're talking about, I'm worried about losing my job, why should I speak up? Because I got bills to pay. I got people to feed, right? It comes down to survival at some point. And to speak to why people don't come forward, it's not just women that don't come forward. We've seen it, especially I think it's actually in often cases harder for men to speak up because of the stigma, right? And whether that's a man who is speaking up against another male perpetrator or against a woman, right? And I think that we hear those cases even fewer because of the fear and the stigma that comes from that.
Yeah. I remember when Terry Crews reported it, and people looked at him like, dude, you're too big to be reporting, basically. Like,
yeah, really.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, he was
ridiculed for that.
Big time, more ridiculed than supported.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about too, what's the girl's name? Megan, married to Prince Harry.
Meghan Markle.
Oh, Meghan Markle. Yeah.
I know it's different situation, but she's telling her truth, and she is getting blasted for it. She probably can't work in the U.S. again, and it's unfortunate. And people have to think of this as an individual situation. Why would she put that whatever they have in London at risk? Her marriage, everything. Her husband is supporting her. Went on to interview with Oprah. They know how big of a deal this is. So clearly there must be a problem if they're willing to put all that at risk. But people are upset because they're like, this has been working for years and generations. Why are y'all messing this up? Why are you calling this out? And just because something has been in place for a long time doesn't necessarily mean it's right or it's inclusive. This is the first time they've had probably someone that was mixed with Black involved in being at the palace or, married to someone within the family. I'm just, now we have these platforms where we can hear and see what everyone is thinking. And it's just unfortunate, how we can't agree on anything. But the point is that people are witnessing that, her telling her truth and telling her story. And she's being ridiculed for it.
Yeah, when you got that Black in you, boy.
It's tough. It's tough.
Something about the
Someone
change.
asked, how would HR handle a situation when a false harassment claim has been filed and there is proof that it was false? What are the consequences in place, whether it's a male or female? What are the consequences for the person who filed the false claim, in so many words?
So I haven't been in this situation before. I think it just depends on the level of egregiousness, depending on if it was a misunderstanding or if it was truly false. But long story short, that person will be reprimanded at the minimum. And, that's an integrity issue there. If it's bad enough, it could be, and if it's their first offense, depending on what it is, it could be termination. The trust is lost there's integrity concerns, that could have possibly impacted other people. So, there's not lots of room for error in that space. It would be managed pretty quickly.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, I don't see anybody else put it. Okay, hold on. Okay. Okay. Thanks so much, you two, for sharing so much knowledge. We appreciate it. Maybe.
Are we going to comment on the last one?
I'm not going to comment on the last one. Is it the issue with Kobe that many people had was that the man had just died? That wasn't the time to bring up his past. Okay. Yep. This is such a difficult topic. Thank you for having it. Oh yeah, you know, we like controversy.
Man, I really want to get
We
into
are,
some
we
stuff,
are,
man.
we are selective. We are selective, and
Yeah, I agree with Mike on that. People are very selective. Even with the Deshaun Watson, me being a Texan fan, I'm 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 actually trying to stay neutral to the whole thing because being that I teach psychology and I teach on, having an open mindset, huh?
Now, so
What
you
you
teach
say?
on social justice and diversity.
And I teach on, so, I'm hoping that, something comes clear for this situation. And, but I do think at the same time, like, this is a very odd time that all of these things have like hit all of a sudden, so it's interesting seeing how things go. But like you both have said, people have their perspective of, what's this and what's that. And yeah. But Dantrell, what you got for us today, man?
All right, man. So this quote comes from the philosopher DJ Kaios. And it says, when we fight each other, we will defeat each other. When we fight gender-based violence, we will defeat gender-based violence. Most women fight every man, and most men fight every woman, thinking they are fighting gender-based violence. Until men and women choose to fight the enemy, which is gender-based violence, instead of fighting each other, that is when we will defeat gender-based violence. It is not certain people or celebrities who should fight this, but it's everyone's calling.
mhm.
I agree, man. I especially that last part, because a lot of people call for celebrities to do this, do that, do that. That's actually one of my discussion board questions to my students. Should we look for celebrities to be out there blasting all this information, and while we stand back and just watch? And I agree with that. I appreciate that, man.
Yeah,
What? Tell you, man, you be on it.
told you, man. If you find these quotes, bro.
And I mean,
Hold on, hold
whatever
on.
you do, it doesn't have to necessarily just be in the workplace as well. I mean, we all have friends or know people who are ridiculous outside of work.
Oh yeah.
You know, educate them, call them out, let them know that's not okay. And,
All right,
there's
y'all,
opportunities if you want to. Go ahead.
I have to hop off. I have another meeting. I'm so sorry, but thank y'all for having me. I enjoyed this discussion and I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Candace, this one might be for you. Carolyn asked, she has a niece who's a paralegal at a male dominant law firm, predominantly male law firm. She's been going through them. Says she just brushed off certain comments. Now she's more aware and understand that it's harassment that she's met with. I'm just being complimentary. I don't mean anything by it, but she feels that she isn't being heard. What are your suggestions for her? There isn't an HR design staff member for her to go to.
Is there any females on the legal team there? That may be a good question. Maybe someone within the organization, find someone else in the organization that she may be comfortable connecting with.
Say just
First,
two females,
okay, I
not
see.
ups.
And if not, unfortunately, that's when sometimes you might have to either step outside of the organization and see what recourse you have available. Trying to think exactly. I don't know if we're in Texas, I don't know if like Texas Workforce Commission or something of that nature may be able to look into that. Also, it's legal recourse where you can get an attorney, but that, that turns things in a different direction pretty quickly. Or sometimes you might have to do, if you don't feel like going through all of that, go look for employment somewhere else. But it just depends on, what type of battle you're willing to fight.
That's a good
Usually
question.
I find when people are in these situations, see if there's someone else in the organization you can trust to get some advice from first, and go from there. And I've known some situations where people, they were actually comfortable pulling that person to the side and having a conversation about how that made them feel, and that was helpful, impactful, and improved their situation. I would need to know more about it to provide specific guidance on what to do. But first off, I would just see if there's someone, another trusted person or organization that you may want to talk to first before moving forward with next steps.
Is there like an agency for individuals that don't feel comfortable going to somebody within their job?
Yeah, and I would have to find out for sure and get back to you. It may be the Texas Workforce Commission, but I need to confirm that.
Okay.
But usually if you receive a complaint, it comes from them. So
okay.
I'm sure it's most likely them.
Well, we appreciate you so much. You have dropped so much knowledge. As you can see, we had a lot of questions too.
Yeah.
This was fun. I'm glad to be a part of it. Thanks for inviting me to this opportunity. It's been great.
Oh yeah. Thank you everyone for being here today.